The National Defense Authorization Act calls for spending $777 billion for defense for fiscal 2022. That top line number is $37 billion more than the budget for this fiscal year. Mackenzie Eaglen is resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Mackenzie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So how would the extra $37 billion for the 2022 national defense budget support initiatives like technology modernization that the Pentagon is considering?
Well, it's more money for everybody. So it's generally supportive of all the priorities of the Defense Department. But most importantly, what it is for the Hill is 3% above inflation for the Defense Department in the next fiscal year, which the Biden budget didn't offer. It shows that Congress is interested in funding the minimum required for defense strategy. That's what they've been told by various military and civilian leadership at the Pentagon for the last half a decade. That's what they need at a minimum to compete with China, which includes technology, and that's with Congress signaling that they're going to meet that need, whether or not the White House submits the right.
Well, you mentioned competing with China. Let's drill down a little bit on that. How would this budget in particular go to challenges, global challenges like that?
So throughout the bill text, well, actually, we don't have the bill yet. It's still private, but we have a summary, a detailed summary of it. And what you find, of course, the common theme is competing better and more strongly, more quickly with China. And the Congress is emphasizing its preference for what they call the specific deterrence initiative. And that's primarily designed to compete against China militarily, although, of course, you have to use all your tools of government, but this committee focuses on the military. And they fund a lot more dollars towards that. And specifically, the combatant commander for the Indo-Pacific region, he had an unfunded requirements list, and he gets an additional $700 million in what was not met in the previous budget request from Capitol Hill.
About how the Pentagon can effectively distribute the budget among the Army, Navy, and Air Force?
I think that's the big debate going into next year. I don't think that the Biden administration had time to really dig into that question for the 22 submission, nor do I think Congress has been interested in taking on being the arbiter of that debate. But what I do think we will see is in the 2023 budget, a significant shift in resources away from some services and bias and preference towards others, particularly the Navy. But I also think it depends on, how much of the extra money Congress proposes will actually get to the Defense Department in the end. By that I mean, if there's a fiscal deal that's required to move legislation, which it will be, is it a number smaller than what the Senate is proposing? Because whatever that number is going to affect the 2023 top line first and foremost. So however much Congress more is able to give or not will determine how much more resources might move among the services next year.
So what about the civilian workforce that supports DoD? How would the 2021 budget affect that? Or sorry, 2022.
Sure. Well, yep. So this administration has proposed growing the civilian workforce, but they're also proposing a cut to the active duty end strength, or total roster, if you will, of the U.S. military. And what I think they'll find is a Congress that's skeptical of that kind of an approach. It doesn't mean that they don't support the defense civilian workforce. I think that they fundamentally do, and significantly. But I think they're going to want to see a corresponding increase or decrease for all of the defense workforces together, not a preference for one over the other. We don't have enough detail, though, because the bill text is still private again in the Senate. It's still unclear. So this is a question that has yet to be answered, which we'll know more as the Senate comes back into town and starts debating it on the floor in the fall.
Mackenzie, you recently called increasing spending on civilians while shrinking active duty force a, quote, mismatched plan, as it's outlined in the 2022 budget request. How can DoD leaders alter that plan to avoid undermining defense flexibility?
Well, I think that it ultimately rests with Congress whether or not they're going to agree with this approach. think there will be some skepticism about cutting active duty military numbers while growing their supported workforce in defense civilians. Typically, what you would see is that these workforces would grow or shrink in tandem because that would link priorities better. Congress is very supportive of the defense civilian workforce. They're going to give them an equal pay raise to the military, I expect, when the bill becomes law. But whether or not one workforce should grow potentially at the expense of the other will be an open question. We don't know yet what's in the bill. I think ultimately you'll see a more balanced approach by Congress, and this administration will have to just accept that outcome since they get the final word.
All right, Mackenzie, thanks so much for being on the program. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.